All right. Good evening, everyone. How are we doing today? I can sense a lot of energy in the room right now. Um, Before we start, I want to say welcome to the 2025 TEDx event here in Twente. Can we please give rounds of applause for everyone who is here today? Honestly, it is really great and it's really amazing seeing everyone's faces here because you being here today signifies one thing. Actually, no, it actually does mean three things to me. The first thing is that you're here to learn, which is very, very important. The next thing is you're here to grow. And the final thing is you're here to have a conversation. You're here to listen to people's viewpoints, to see another perspective on how people think and how they reason and how they convey their thoughts. And that to me is very, very important because in this day and age, it is crucial that we maintain dialogue on different facets of life. Before we go any further, my name is Akin. I'm 24 years old. I'm from Nigeria. I work as a chemical engineer in Amsterdam in an American company. And you might have seen my face on some Facebook or Instagram ads. And if you did, I'm sorry if I ruined your day. But today, I'm going to be your host for this session. So again, thank you for being here. Now, for today, we have a very amazing lineup of speakers from different facets of life, from strategy, from consulting, from innovation, from entrepreneurship, from psychology, different branches of life. And honestly, it's really, really amazing how these guys have prepped. And I think you'll be surprised, and I think you'll be amazed at what they deliver to you today. So without further ado, I want to kickstart the 2025 TEDx event. And again, thank you for being here. So our very first speaker goes by the name of Sebastian Kieft. So you see, Sebastian is a very peculiar person. He is very interested in psychology and especially very interested in neurodiversity. Sebastian is trying to challenge what we define as normal. What even is normal? That's a very valid question. In terms of success, in terms of belonging, in terms of anything you might envision, what is normal? Without further ado, I wouldn't spoil his talk for you, but can we please give a big round of applause for Sebastian as he comes to the stage?
Thanks, man. When I was a child, I was very passionate about my hobby, playing with Legos. Yeah, I could build and build hours after hours, building my own utopias where everything made sense to me. And I remember my father standing downstairs, yelling at me, "Sebastian, dinner!" But I couldn't hear him. And after calling me, he ran upstairs, opened the door, shouted at me, and now I've had it. I'm going to take you to the doctor to get your hearing checked out. Because he thought I was going deaf. Well, good news, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not deaf. The bad news is I was grounded for 3 months. Yeah, he thought I wasn't listening on purpose, but that was not the case. I was just deeply and deeply focused. And that's when I learned my first big lesson. In a world that doesn't understand focus, focus can look like defiance. And in a world that doesn't understand difference, difference can look like disobedience. And that lesson followed me throughout my whole life, throughout my whole career. But something special happened when I was 22. I felt broken before that. But when 22, I was broken, but diagnosed. I have ADHD. Are there any people in the audience who have ADHD? Okay, one. Okay. Well, statistically speaking, there should have been more people here with ADHD, but maybe you weren't paying any attention and didn't hear the question. Yes? Yeah. Well, the diagnosis wasn't the surprise. The surprise was how long I've been trying to fit in, to shrink, to behave, to force my mind into a mold that didn't match its shape. I pushed, I masked, I burned out. I tried to change my mind, but what if the mind wasn't the problem? What if the mold was broken? See, imagine trying running Windows software on a MacBook. It will crash, it will glitch, it will freeze. And instead of questioning the software, I blamed the machine. I blamed me. Because we live in a world obsessed with self-improvement, with optimization, with discipline, with grit. So I tried to change my mind. I tried to push myself into a system that wasn't made for me. I had to become that one person, the best version of myself, of someone I am not. And maybe some minds weren't meant to be optimized. Maybe some minds are meant to challenge the system entirely. Because my story isn't rare. It's just a version of a much bigger reality. And each brain differs from one another, and you call the variation in brains neurodiversity. And just like biodiversity means, nature thrives through difference. And neurodiversity means our minds do too. And some people are neurotypical. Their brain matches what society expects. And others, like me, are neurodivergent. We process, we feel, and we function differently. And ADHD and autism and dyslexia, these aren't glitches. They are not problems needing to be fixed. They are variations, and they are everywhere. As a matter of fact, 1 in 5 is neurodivergent. 1 in 5. That means in every classroom, in every office, at every dinner table, and even tonight, someone is quietly adapting to survive a world that wasn't built with them in mind. See, I'm not the only one whose brain is mislabeled, misread, or misunderstood. And it's not just a diagnosis, it's not a label or something what's hype on TikTok or something. It's part of the human condition. And that 20% often goes unseen, unheard, and unrecognized. And it's not just their loss or my loss. It's all of our losses. Because ADHD brings creativity, it brings speed, it brings emotional insights, and autism brings clarity, honesty, and deep system thinking. And dyslexia brings storytelling, innovation, and visual thinking. They bring wonder, joy, and creativity into the world. So what if we stop trying to fix these minds and started fixing the systems around them? Because right now the system isn't supporting at all. It's filled with stereotype after stereotype. Like people with autism are supposedly socially impaired, or people with dyslexia are unable to read or write. And people with ADHD, kind of a funny story, are supposedly very bad at relationships. Because you can Google this tonight, Google ADHD and love, you will find article after article stating that I dumped my boyfriend because of his ADHD, or the 10 ways to survive your boyfriend with ADHD. Yeah, I felt broken when I read that. And right now I'm in a loving relationship, and I asked my girlfriend, what do you think? And what do you like about my weird brain with ADHD? She looked at me with eyes better focused than I ever could, and she told me, I like your brain because you are always honest, you feel people very deeply, you always think of the most crazy and wonderful dates to do together, and most importantly, you're always happy to see me. Ah, that's nice, right? Yeah, until I realized she was describing a golden retriever. Yeah, it's horrible. Well, actually, I am that golden retriever. When she's not at home, I really do miss her deeply. And I went her a keychain, going into the door, I jump up from the couch, run to her with a very big hug, tail wagging and everything. It's lovely. But she really likes that. She doesn't just tolerate my ADHD, she loves it. And that happens when you build your environment with your own brain in mind. Everything that once made you too much becomes exactly enough. So that's when I started doing something radical. I stopped trying to fit the mold and started to build my own one, my very own utopia. Not with Lego bricks this time, but with boundaries, with respect, with people who love me, and freedom. My very own neurotopia. A place where rules don't erase difference, but rise to meet it. A few months ago, when I gave a lecture similar to this one, I met a young girl. She was 15 years old, and a few months ago, I met a girl at one of my lectures, similar to this one, and she raised her hand, and she told me she was autistic, was being bullied for it, and she asked me, do you have any advice for younger people like myself? And she looked at me like I had the answer for her, but I didn't. I was once 14 years old as well, and I knew her battle is far from over. So I didn't sugarcoat it, I didn't lie. I told her, you were born into a world that wasn't made with you in mind. And that's not your fault. But it also means you're not broken. Because it won't get any easier. Not for me, not for her, unless we change the system and not the child. We don't just think differently, we speak differently too. We may be using the same words, but they don't mean the same thing. Focus, normal, too much. To one person it means structure, to another it means suffocation. Lazy, I was called lazy my whole life. By my parents, teachers, coaches. But I wasn't lazy, I was understimulated. It gave me the right amount of dopamine, the right drive, and suddenly I'm unstoppable. Or unmotivated, there's another one. But I wasn't unmotivated. My brain doesn't respond to pressure, only to purpose. Or disruptive. But I was just trying to connect with my peers in the only way I knew how. We're not just misunderstood, we're mistranslated. So if we want to build a world where all minds can thrive, we have to think of a shared language. A shared language that works both ways. Yes, society must do better. Yes, they must try to understand us better. But we, the neurodivergent, we can speak up too. Not to apologize, not to perform, but to explain. And it can start with one easy sentence. This is how my brain perceives this world. And that's how we meet in the middle. That's how we build something better. So, what can we do? What can you do? Because this story isn't just mine. Maybe it's your colleagues, your partners, your students, your child's, and maybe even yours. You who have been sprinting at work, just you, the person, you who've been sprinting at work, never knowing if it's quite enough. Or you who sits alone at a company lunch because everything around you is too overwhelming. Or maybe you, the person who had a burnout for 2 years ago and still thinks your boundaries are your weakness. Maybe you don't have a label. Maybe you don't have an official diagnosis. No official reason, but you do know the feeling. The feeling of biting your tongue. The feeling being punished without breaking any rules. Because you don't have to be a neuroscientist to build a better mold. You just need to shift your lens. And maybe inclusivity starts not with policy, but with asking questions. And we can ask these questions at the dinner table, at the company, in your classroom. What makes your mind feel at ease? What gives you energy and what drains it? Maybe a manager sees someone struggle and asks, what kind of support do you need instead of what's wrong? When a parent sees your child struggling, and don't ask, why can't you focus, but what would make your mind feel at ease? And someone stops trying to fix their partner and asks, what lights you up? Because when we change our questions, we can change our connections. When we change our connections, we can build a better mold. So I want to leave you with this. Look around you. Who in your life is still shrinking to fit? What part of your world, your office, your classroom, your home, was built for sameness? What's one rule, one routine, one expectation that excludes someone close to you? And what would happen if you rewrote that? Not for the system, but for the person right in front of you. Because the mind was never broken. It's just the mold wasn't built with all of us in mind. So let's change that. Let's do better. Don't change the mind, change the mold. Thank you very much.
Wow, let's give it up again for Sebastian. Quick rain check. How are we feeling? We good? Everyone's good? Can I get a thumbs up if everyone's good? Great. Awesome. All right. So, a key point that struck to me from Sebastian's talk was not to try to change our minds, but trying to change the mold. And I think that's one thing I hope all of us here today can take away from this conversation. Now, our very next speaker comes all the way from across the pond. If you go towards the left side of the map, I think, to the United States of America, our next speaker is called Tessera Crosby. She was born in the US, but now lives in a beautiful town in the Netherlands, or city in the Netherlands, called Zwolle. Am I right? Anyone from Zwolle here? Anyone? No? Oh, nice. Great to see you. So Tessera lives now in Zwolle, but growing up, she went through so many challenges, so many different traumatic challenges that I think if any of us were to go through that today, I think we'll find a hard time in overcoming them. She was married at a young age. She was married for 14 years with her first husband, until the unfortunate demise of her first husband. And during that whole time of that period, she noticed that there was a stigma towards talking about grief when it comes to the workplace or those kind of environments. But fast forward, she's now remarried, she has 2 amazing kids, and now she's giving HR managers, she's giving companies, she's giving organizations practical tips, workshops, trainings on how to integrate grief and how to integrate grief conversations in the workplace. So it's not so much of a stigma anymore. Without further ado, can we please give a big round of applause for Tessera Crosby.
Six weeks after I buried my husband, I woke up alone in bed. And for a while, I couldn't figure out why I was alone, why he wasn't next to me. I did know that I felt completely dysregulated and disoriented, and everything seemed to hurt. My whole body seemed to hurt, every single cell. It felt like the skin had been peeled off of my body. Not only my body hurt, my brain inside my head hurt as well. That, and the fact that I couldn't even remember for a while that he had passed, made me think that I was going crazy. I now know this is what grief does. Grief isn't just something in your heart. It affects your whole body. It affects your nervous system, so your heart rate goes up, your digestion and your immune system go down. And grief now has been proven to affect multiple regions of the brain, including those responsible for memory, focus, decision-making, and emotional regulation. Thus, grief is physical, cognitive, emotional, and all-consuming. Before my husband died, for the first time in my life, I was actually doing pretty well. I had overcome some of the battles and the issues of my youth. And I was in a job that combined working and studying, high-paced, demanding, and full-on. And I loved it. My grades were high, I was thriving, and I was learning a lot. I was having fun at work. For the first time in my life, I finally had a bit of confidence. Then came his cancer, his pain, and the roller coaster that cancer patients and their families go through. It had a lot of impact. Even before his death, there were parts of him that I was losing, and there were things I was losing. I now know that is called secondary griefs, the invisible losses or invisible griefs. The equality in our relationship was off. The balance shifted. The way we always used to do things wasn't possible anymore. And I couldn't lean on my husband because he was fighting to stay alive. So how could I burden him with things, trivial things, like having a bad day at work? But secondary losses can also be, and this is something I had also experienced years before even. I had gotten bad news, and I was in no state to drive home, but I went in my car anyway, and I drove home and I crashed my car. The secondary loss can be the loss of a car. The secondary loss can also be the loss of finances, because of more medical bills to pay, and the loss of a job. And a secondary loss can also be the loss of mental clarity because of the roller coaster that you are in the moment. And somewhere along that time, my work did start to slip a bit. My focus fractured, my memory was a bit blurred. So my supervisor pulled me aside. And even though she knew I had spent the last few nights at the ER with my husband, who knows here that you could spend a whole night at the ER? I spent the whole nights at the ER instead of sleeping, and she knew about my home situation. She said, "This isn't about your home life. You just can't handle this. You are not cut out for this job." And I didn't have the vocabulary to defend myself. So I simply believed her for years. And every bit of confidence that I had finally gained was gone again. It took me years to realize that it wasn't me, that it was grief, that it was stress, that it was neurological overload. Because here's the thing I wish someone would have told me back then. That grief rewires your brain. Literally. Dr. Mary Frances O'Connor, who is a grief researcher, has now proven that the brain's default relationship maps, stored in the posterior cingulate cortex, are shattered by loss. and that the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making, focus, and logic thinking, shows a decreased activity on brain scans of actively grieving people. This is why grieving people feel foggy, forgetful, and disoriented. It is not weakness, it is their brain trying to adapt and trying to learn, having to learn something devastating, having to learn how to live in a world that doesn't make any sense anymore, how to live in a world that has changed, and how to live in a world that has a different future than they had imagined or had been working towards. And after my husband died, I was completely alone. Being a woman alone in this world, I did not feel safe. So I signed up for a combat sport. And something unexpected happened to me. In that gym, gloves on, body moving, punching, sweating, running, sparring, it gave my grief an outlet. It gave my fear a rhythm. But most importantly, it gave my brain relief. Because when I was running, sparring, punching, I couldn't spiral into thought loops, the way is often so common with grieving people. And my brain simply didn't have the bandwidth to ruminate when I was running. And in that stillness of motion, my brain began to restructure itself. The movements became my medicine. And in the end, my body saved my mind. Research has now proven that movement is the most powerful and the most effective thing you can do while your brain is undergoing changes. It facilitates learning, which means the brain can rewire itself and can adapt to a world that has changed. And I myself returned to work very quickly after his death. People thought I was doing well. They thought I was coping well because I was at work again. They said, "Oh, you are doing so well. You are already full-time at work again." But I had what psychologists call an instrumental grief. Instrumental grief style is a grief style that holds on to structure by holding on to daily routines, and a grief style that is also marked by overthinking and taking action. These are the people that might organize a marathon for their loved ones. These are the people who just seem to keep going. And these are the people who we call in our society strong. But that appearance might shift, and 3 to 6 months later, after their loss, they might develop burnout-like symptoms. And they may need some time off of work then. In contrast, people with an intuitive grief style, this is the grief style that is more outwardly expressed. They cry a lot more, they cry more openly, they talk more about their grief, and they seem less together. They may need more time off of work in the beginning, but when they do return back to work, they are able to build it up steadily, and there's less chance of a fallback then. Now, what if workplaces knew the difference between intuitive grief style and instrumental grief style? They could better anticipate what kinds of support are needed and when. Maybe not just immediately after loss, but maybe more importantly, in the months that follow. And they could understand why one employee might want to go back to work a week after the death of their child, and another might need almost half a year of sick leave before they can return. And the fact that they have to take sick leave and that there isn't a dedicated grief leave is already very sad, but that is a topic not for now. As I mentioned, I had more of an instrumental grief style. a grief style that is also marked by taking action. That doesn't work out very well always. In my case, I wanted to take action, give meaning to his suffering by publishing my husband's unfinished book. So I hired a ghostwriter. And it cost me 15,000 euros, and I still don't have the book. You see, grief makes you vulnerable, not just mentally, but also, and not just emotionally, but also financially. And I wish someone would have told me back then, don't make big decisions right now, because my brain was not ready yet. In the same matter, workplaces would be wise not to hand over large financial responsibilities to people who are actively grieving. And because I find work so important, and I wish that grief would not be so much of a taboo in the workplace, I would like to offer a few other ways how workplaces can help. I've already mentioned the two grieving styles, instrumental grief and intuitive grief, and if this would be more known, that it would help manage expectations, create more custom care, and in some cases prepare for a potential fallback. I've also mentioned not to expect high-stake decision-makings too soon. Give focused but low-risk tasks instead, and give the brain time to stabilize before you can trust it with major negotiations or financial responsibilities. Another thing that would really benefit grieving employees if there would be more flexible structures. Because during the active grieving period, and often a long time afterwards, some days are bearable and others just aren't. And grief disrupts sleep and energy. So if it would be possible in a job to have flexible working hours, or maybe later working hours, that would really benefit a grieving employee. And we could train managers, leaders, and supervisors to see the difference between disengagement and disorientation. Because grief doesn't always look the way we think it looks. It doesn't always look like crying, but it might look like zoning out during a meeting, or irritability, or memory loss and missed deadlines. When we take all these things into account, a grieving employee might return to work a bit more earlier or more consistently. This would benefit them simply for the fact that they would be among other people more. And grieving people do not grieve well alone. We are humans. We are sociable creatures. We are not made to grieve alone. So why not assign grief peer mentors in the workplace? Or facilitate walk and talks? That way, movement is naturally included as well. It would be really great if workplaces could encourage as much movement as possible in the workplace. Maybe by having a yoga room or boxing gloves in a break room. This way, the grieving employee, but people in general, will have a way to shift their focus and to let their minds exhale. And above all, to give words to a grieving person. Even if you don't know what to say, you could say, I don't know what to say, but I'm here for you. Or, there is no wrong way to grieve. Or, you still belong here. What do you need today? Because psychological safety begins with giving words. And words like that are oxygen to a grieving person. Words like that don't just offer comfort, it offers safety, and it offers a sense of dignity. It acknowledges to the person that they are not broken, but that they are human, a human that is adapting and learning. And when you meet that learning with care, flexibility, and dignity, You don't just get your employee back maybe a bit more sooner or more consistently, but you get a more resilient employee back. More resilient employees build more resilient teams, maybe more connected, maybe more loyal, but most importantly, more resilient. Because you didn't just see their grief, you honored it. Thank you.
Awesome. That was a great, great speech. Again, how we all doing? I'm always going to keep on checking, by the way, so get used to it. All good? Everyone's good? Feeling good? Great. Awesome. All right. So, our next speaker is not from the west side, if you look at the map, but you got to look down. You have to look down where the map is at. She's from South Africa. Her name is Penny de Villiers, and she's an author, she's a certified speaker, and she's a wellness consultant. And she is the founder of the platform rebalancedlife.com. Now, if I scan the room a little bit and try to understand the demographics of everyone, I'm seeing half our students and I'm seeing half our working class people, which is great, I'm guessing. I'm also a working class person. I say that because whether you're in either group, there was one key thing that some parts of us go through, and that is burnout. It's something that is evident amongst every single person or demographics of our population.
Yeah.
Like, it's so funny, I was coming on the train, I was reading a stat from the Dutch Research Institute, or in Netherlands you say, de Nederlandse Organisatie voor Toegepast Natuurwetenschappelijk Onderzoek. Yes! That was awesome. Hopefully I didn't butcher that. So that is the Dutch Research Institute, and they put out a study that showcased that Netherlands companies, or companies in the Netherlands in total, are losing a combined 2.8 billion euros because employees are absent from work, and that absenteeism is due to burnout. Now, that's a lot of money if you ask me. So Penny is going to talk to us today about one key thing. Should you try to redefine your worth, or should you burn out just trying to prove it? Without further ado, let's welcome Penny to the stage.
Hello.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. I was 23 when I sat in an auditorium very much like this one. Graduation was days away and my head was buzzing with career plans, strategies, goals. And then Jim Rohn walked into the room. Successful entrepreneur, mentor to Tony Robbins, and he handed me his keys to success. He said the marketplace pays for the value that you bring to it. So if you want to earn more, you need to bring more value. That's why a programmer earns more than an accounts clerk. So I set my sails for success. I read books. I stacked credentials. I worked overtime. My CV was glowing. And when people ask me, so what do you do? You know that question we ask when we want to suss each other out. Well, I had the perfect elevator pitch because I had the job, I had the house, I had the car. I was superwoman until I wasn't. One day, my body gave out. I was unable to hold up my own body weight, found myself crawling around the house. I thought I had something neurologically wrong with me. It turned out to be far more common. Burnout. You think I'd be relieved at the news, but I was ashamed. I was ashamed that I couldn't cut it. So I headed to my therapist's office, slopped on the couch, rattled off my schedule like a machine, to-do lists, side hustles, projects, a million tabs open in my brain, and she just sat there, calm, like therapists do. And then she asked me a question that cracked my whole world open. She said, "Do you still feel valuable even when you're not doing any of this?" I answered, "No." But that one word, that reflexive no, really exposed an unsettling truth, that I had built my identity on scaffolding, on titles, on praise, on performance. And now it felt as if that scaffolding was being pulled away. I was terrified. My framework, my worth, had only ever been tied to my output. Is your identity tied to what you do? What happens when you lose your job, or if your health fails, or if your title falls away? While I was quietly falling apart, I realized the rest of the world was too. Asana did research, a global study, and over 70% of its participants admitted to having burnout in the last year. Burnout is not a personal failure. It's a design flaw, and it's been experienced by employees around the world. And the more I looked, the more I saw it, etched in performance appraisals, buried in software, and hidden behind corporate statements in bold, empty font. It was around this time that I met Monique. I was consulting for a logistics tech company, and they were rolling out software that optimized their clients' delivery networks. And Monique was on the team that was going to be replaced. At 8 a.m., the system went live. At 9:15, Monique sat at her desk, a tear tracing down her cheek. She said, "This system has just optimized what I spent the last 10 years of my life perfecting. So why am I here?" I heard my therapist's question echo. Who are we without achievement? Because burnout is just one way that the floor is shifting, but the real quake is still coming. Futurists tell us that more than 50% of us will lose our jobs, or they will morph into something else within this decade. Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, says that in the next 5 years, artificial general intelligence will outsmart Nobel laureates and outperform Mozart. Yuval Noah Harari, historian, warns us of a useless class, not because we're lazy, but displaced by code. And besides tech, we are finding people are evaluating the very foundations of work. Universal basic income pilots are being run in countries like Kenya and in Finland. And they are asking this question: what happens when we don't have to work? In those sample groups, they pay people enough money to live on every month with no strings attached. Sounds good. Results are positive. Happiness goes up. Well-being increases. But there's this underlying question: if I'm not earning my paycheck, am I worth it? And so we arrive at the question that will define the next era of humanity. Where do we find our value when our jobs fall away? What is the answer? I believe that our value is not something we earn. It's something we're born with. It doesn't live in our output. It lives in our essence. And that essence isn't generic. It's unique to all of us. Some of you lead with empathy. Some of you bring energy. Some of you teach with clarity. Some of you hold this room steady just by being in it. And some of you carry warmth as if it's woven into your skin. These are our human traits, not outcomes, not performance, just who we are. And here's the real shift. What if your title wasn't project manager or PhD student? What if it was just human? What would your job description be then? After years of reflection and coaching people in burnout, I finally wrote my own. Curiosity, compassion, and conscience. You won't find these three on a resume, but they are my foundation. They're what I return to when I'm winning or whether I'm recovering, whether I'm promoted or laid flat. These three are mine. And so I invite you this evening to think about your three, the three things that remain when the titles disappear, the things that no algorithm can replace, the things that make you, you. Because here are the real keys to life. When you wake up living from your deeper traits, you end each day richer, not in euros, but in meaning, in purpose, in connection. These are not performance metrics, they're human metrics, and they are the ones that we have forgotten to value. They also can't be monetized. Empathy, gratitude, conscience. You won't find them as line items on a spreadsheet. But they are what make you irreplaceable. So let's jump to 2035. AI dispatches freight in milliseconds, and Monique 2.0 spends her day coaching autonomous truck supervisors on empathy. Behind her, the dashboard shows performance metrics, but also moments of curiosity, acts of compassion, and decisions of conscience. When that email arrives one day, your job has been automated. You can reply, "My job was never my worth." I remain conscious, I remain compassionate, and I remain curious, and therefore I remain valuable. If schools, governments, companies from The Hague to Washington start from this premise, then we'll stop grinding people into metrics and start valuing them for who they are. Because true transformation is not about optimizing output. It's about honoring essence. So next time you're in a cafe or at a conference, don't lead with, "What do you do?" But try, "What inspires you?" And watch shoulders drop, eyes soften and walls fall. Because when we stop asking people to prove themselves, they finally show us who they really are. Your job isn't your worth. It never was, and it never will be. And no robot can outvalue you at being human. Because the world and the future depends not on us proving that we are machines, but it depends on us proving that we're not. Thank you.
The world depends on us proving that we are not machines, but we are. Exactly. So now we're in the second half of the show today, or the talks today. And our very next speaker goes by the name of Albert Wong. Now, Albert has a special place in my heart because he's actually one of the professors for my study program at the University of Twente when I used to study still in chemical engineering. Anyone here from chemical engineering? Anyone? Yes, that's one person. Let's go. So great. So I say that because Albert is a very curious person. And as you all know, scientists are very curious. And Albert's curiosity started from one small experiment in a lab. Like that's how it always starts, one experiment in a lab, make some things in a lab. That's how it always starts for any scientist. But Albert's curiosity went further, right? He was really interested in how chemical reactions can organize or can react in harmony to make chemical systems or molecular systems interact. I know, it's a mouthful. I can't even explain it myself. Without further ado, I want you to please give a round of applause for the next speaker of today, Albert Wong.
Thank you. Little of 10 years ago, I was at the Royal Theatre Carré in Amsterdam. I went there to visit a concert together with my wife, back then my girlfriend, who happened to be a major fan of Skunk Anansi, a British rock band performing in Carré. That night was special. The rock band would perform all their songs in an acoustic version. And when doing so, they could show a very different side of them, a more vulnerable side, I would say. And it was especially noticeable when they introduced their songs. They introduced it with a story, and there was one particular story that really stood out to me. That was when they introduced the song Hedonism, right at the end of this concert. This song, for them, was the song that made their career. Now, what I haven't told you is that in that year, I actually started my PhD in chemistry. I don't write songs. What I do is make experiments. And I started to drift off while they were playing, because at that moment, a realization came to me. I was thinking, I was dreaming actually, that maybe one day I could do an experiment that could be the start of my career. Now, to illustrate what are the type of experiments I'm talking about, I actually brought one today with me. So behind me, what you see is a video that I've captured in the lab. And the glass container that you see over there is of this size. In it, there's a blue liquid, and it had turned yellow. But it doesn't stay yellow. What it does, it turns back blue. Chemical reactions are not supposed to do that. But this kept on going from yellow to blue, to yellow to blue. And this is called an oscillating chemical reaction. This was first discovered by a chemist named Boris Belousov in 1961. And right when he saw it, he knew it. This is a major discovery of what I just told you. Chemical reactions are not supposed to do this. He didn't know how it happened. He also didn't know why it happened. It wasn't a scientific accident that he saw what he did. And so it took a little while to convince the scientific community that what he observed was real. It took actually very long for the scientific community until Belousov actually retired from science to finally understand that chemical reactions that can do something like this, that can oscillate, are very important in life. What chemical reactions or oscillating chemical reactions do is they regulate our day and night rhythm, they regulate our metabolism, and they regulate many other biological processes. How can something that important be something we cannot make in the lab? The question between 1961 and 2013, that's the start of my PhD, is this: how can we make chemical reactions to oscillate? This was an unsolved question for that many years. And so my PhD advisor thought this would be a great challenge for you to work on. And so he teamed me up with a friend of mine, and together we immediately found a sort of hyper-focus. And by hyper-focus, what I mean is we worked for 1.5 years straight, every day, including many evenings, many weekends, trying to find out if we could build a blueprint or sort of a map that could actually make these type of reactions. Now, what we understood very soon is that one reaction is not enough, 2 reactions is not enough. You need a set of reactions. And that's the difficulty. Normally, or what traditionally chemists is trained to do, is to make molecules or study reactions. But here we needed something else. What we needed, what we found after 1.5 years, is the following. We needed many compounds. All of them needed to react all together in order to make something that I've now called it blue and yellow to oscillate. So I will not go in detail here, but what you see is a couple of Pac-Mans. These are enzymes, proteins that can cut small molecules, and some of them I have depicted here. And one of them is yellow. It means that blue can somehow make a process happening that creates a yellow molecule, and when that happens, the yellow molecule can react onto the blue one to kill it. Everything else around it, the network around it, is needed to sustain this process. And that's what makes it so difficult. And after 1.5 years, we did the key experiment that was needed to prove our point. After 1.5 years, we finally made it. It oscillated. This is, to us, this was the most joyful day in my PhD at that point. Let me explain to you what we saw that day. On the vertical axis is concentration. That's the amount of blue component that is created in that reactor. And what we did, is monitor that production over time. That's the horizontal axis. And what you now see is that first you have this peak that is created because you create or produce a lot of blue. Yellow starts to produce, and then it kills whatever was created in the first place. It takes a while for the second wave to start, and then it is killed again, and until after 20 hours or so, it stabilizes into a fixed period that is the same amount of time required to have one peak, and the peaks are always the same. And now that was the point that we knew that what we have created was indeed an oscillating chemical reaction. I should actually tell you, the data points that you see here depicted, they are measured manually. It meant that if we had to make this reaction to happen or make this experiment to work, we actually spent 60 hours plus to measure what came out of that reactor. And that means to us that we had spent 2 all-nighters doing this. And I want to tell you that I actually still remember the day that we started the experiment. That morning, we knew this is it. This must be the day, because we also failed 100 times. In case you have noticed, on the top left, this is experiment number 119. We had spent a lot of time understanding what not to do. We failed a couple of times. We understood this is what we needed to tweak, to change ever so slightly, to finally know that on that day of this experiment, everything had to work. And so we started the day, we prepared the setup. Right around 4, we wanted to start, but then we looked at each other. We said, okay, let's have a dinner first. Let's prepare for what's to come. We had a dinner, we started the experiment. The first night was a little bit tough, but then we knew in the afternoon, the day after, on the afternoon, we saw what we wanted, and the second day was easy. And I think on day 3, this was by all means the best day of our scientific career. At that point, we didn't know yet that this experiment would be the most important experiment in our first publication about this work that came 1 year later. What we didn't know is that publication would become indeed the blueprint for making molecular oscillators. What I couldn't foresee is that this became the foundation for building my own research group at the University of Twente, here in Enschede, 10 years later. And now I got to guide my own PhD students, encourage them to do experiments just like these. But what I do now is I try to tell them to do it differently, a little bit smarter. What we use now are chips. These are small microfluidic chips. You can see the same thing happening. Something that is yellow becomes blue, something that blue becomes yellow. What I mean by microfluidic chips, by the way, are this size of chips. In there is a small microchannel, and that's why they are called microfluidics, and the liquid can go through this channel. What you notice now is that blue doesn't only become yellow and the other way around. Yellow can reach the end, but blue cannot. I will explain why this is important in a minute. What I really want to establish now is that what we have done is we have first built a blueprint. Having that, we can now make devices that are smaller, more sophisticated, more controlled. There are no need for all-nighters. Everything is automated. Thus, we have a platform for us to make new discoveries. And one of the things that we got interested as a team now is to study if the molecular networks that we make can actually do something beyond oscillating. Can they, for example, compute? Can they process information? So it's a very rudimentary example that I want to show you here is what we do, since we work with small devices, we coat the inner side of these channels with a polymer. And what it does, it interferes, it changes the reactions inside it, and thereby any input sequence that you would put in now changes into something else. And what do you know? One input sequence can be translated into many output sequences. That should not happen, actually. And so what we started to think about is that information processing, now based on molecules, but in general, is something that is what humans have been a little bit uncurious about in the past years. A colleague of mine had recommended me a book not so long ago, and the book is called Probably Approximately Correct, written by a mathematician, Leslie Vaillant. Now, what Leslie Vaillant tells in his book is that computing, the concept that was invented by Alan Turing, was actually never meant for building a computer. Can you imagine that? The concept of which we know that is manipulating ones and zeros was never meant for developing the technology of what we have done in the past 80 years, a technology that had marveled beyond anyone's imagination. What that concept was meant for is understanding the fundamental laws of nature. In nature, you can find many types of living systems, and all of them can compute. All of them are capable of solving complex tasks in very complicated environments. And there's nothing you can program to take into account all these scenarios. So what differentiates that type of computing from what we do, or what is perhaps in your iPhone, is that it's not exact. It can actually not do many of the things that you can do with your iPhone, but it can do one thing much better, and that is adapt. It can extract information from the environment. And that is why that experiment that I showed you is so important. Let me show it to you again. This experiment that I explained to you went from blue to yellow in this channel, and from yellow to blue. But whereas yellow could reach the end, blue cannot. That meant something for us. It meant that the yellow state of the system is a little bit more stable. That's where you can store memory, albeit temporarily. But since the blue state is less stable, what that can do is become susceptible to changes in the environment. That is the stage wherein adaptation can occur. And when you now combine the two, what you get is a system that is history dependent. A system that is capable of memorizing what happened in the past. And now what we do in our group is try to use that or define what type of memory that is and use that to process information or to induce actions in the future. And if we can do that, we will be able to make completely new algorithms that are chemically driven. Now, would that help us to develop also new paradigms in computing? I think no one knows. I think the only way to know is to try. And I think that's just the power of doing experiments. When you do experiments like these, you can push the boundaries. You can break a frame. And looking back at that evening in Carré, in the Royal Theatre Carré, I think my first experiment was lucky enough to help me trigger my career. It did actually much more than that. That first experiment showed me that in chemistry, I can find my reason, I can find my creativity, I can share my curiosity. And I know many of you are not chemists, but all of you, deep down, are researchers. You all have an intrinsic drive to build, to create, to imagine. And I think that's what chemistry or life in general is about. Building something that you can imagine and finding pleasure in what you create. Thank you.
Chemistry, am I right? Who doesn't love chemistry? I definitely love chemistry. I'm a chemical engineer, so it's my day today. So thank you to Albert Wong for that amazing speech. We're going to the last two speakers of today. The last two speakers for our good conversation. Our next speaker is called Phaedra Romney. Now, she is a strategic systems architect. I know, it's big. And she's also an author of the book, De Macht van Invloed. That's 2 for Dutch. Come on, please clap for me right now. I'm doing very well. My Dutch is amazing. It means the power of influence in English. So that book is mostly written for women who are trying to navigate the male-dominated hierarchies in the workspaces. And as we all know as humans, wherever you are, we all have biases. We all believe that my way is the best, or your way is the best, or your way is the best. We all have things that we think we can find a way to solve a problem. And the thing is, these biases, they are ingrained in our systems. It could be from birth. It could be from watching a YouTube video. It could be from listening to Albert Wong talk about chemistry. We all have biases, and sometimes these biases could be to our own detriment. So today, Phaedra is going to talk about how these biases reinforce in our minds and how we could probably try to change that. Without further ado, I want to welcome Phaedra Romney to the stage.
As a child, I would lie on my stomach for hours, looking at ants. I would look at them walking by one behind the other in a straight line, as if they were following an invisible rule. One day I decided, I want to do a little experiment. So I swiped my finger through the line. And you know what happened? The ant behind stopped, lost, confused. he didn't know what to do. Then all at once, it stepped right back into the path and followed the other ants. That's the day I discovered most things have a pattern they follow. And if you see them clearly, you can interrupt them. We like to believe that leadership is about merit. Work hard. Do what you can. Don't just follow everyone. Do the right thing. But for some of us, it doesn't always work that way. Too brown, too quiet, too sensitive, too. And the problem with that is that things you do when you don't fit the leadership frame are sometimes misunderstood. So assertiveness in a man, in a woman, can be seen as cold, calculated. And if you are the only one, the only person of color, the only person with who's very quiet or different, if you're the only, you become even more exposed, more inclined to be overlooked, ignored, not seen. And when you look at these systems like I have, you would think, well, she wouldn't fall prey to any of that. But let me give you an example of what happened with me. I was at a garden party talking to my friend Daphne. We were talking about merit and who should be leading, bias, stereotyping. And then she said, "Oh, there's my doctor." And I looked, I saw a tall woman and a short man. And naturally I said, "Is that him?" And she said, "No, that's her." So even me, who has studied this, still fall prey to what we call mind bugs, or rather psychologists call them mind bugs. What are mind bugs? Mind bugs are when you see people not as a person, but as the stereotype they represent. And we all have that in us. Our mind works like that because it wants to conserve energy and not spend useless time into figuring out who is what. So when you're distracted, or like me, glass of Chardonnay at hand, chatting with my friend, distracted, running on autopilot, what do? Mind bug. See, man, woman, and I go straight to the stereotype. How does that work in the workplace? Let me give you another example. Say if your boss, or anyone else at work, they don't see you clearly, they don't know where to place you. What do they do then? Oh, grab the nearest stereotype, because they can't place you. So what should you do in those circumstances? You make yourself unmistakably clear. Make yourself a category of one. Because if they can't mislabel you, they definitely can't stick you in a hole and decide that you are leadership material or not. You are the one deciding that. If you look at how things work, when you are a category of 1, what I saw, oh, wait, clearly that's how it works, category of 1, then they can't mislabel you. What's underneath? What's the pattern underneath? In my research, I discovered 4 hidden loops, but I'm just going to explain one tonight. You fit the leadership frame. You get an opportunity because you're unmistakably the leader. Because you get that opportunity, you are more trusted. And if you're more trusted, you get even more opportunities. And the cycle is reinforced. So how do you break that? What can you do about that? It's in us. It's something that we have. And what makes it more difficult is that everyone around you is saying, bias? That's something from the past. It's not a problem anymore. And because it's hidden, many people don't even believe it exists. And what makes it even more difficult, what compounds the situation, you start believing it yourself. It's hidden. Everyone is saying it doesn't exist. It's in the past. You know you have to work hard, show up, do the right thing, and you're seeing this one doing it, that one doing it. So then it has to be you. Who else? What else can it be? Then I discovered in my research something called, it's a framework, ASAP, ASAP. Anyone, ASAP? What could that mean? I'm hearing a little noise there. As soon as possible. No, it's not as soon as possible. In this case, it's anticipate, strategize, amplify, protect. Anticipate stands for you have seen this happen before. So you can anticipate for the next time on what you can or will do. And that's where strategize comes in. So you strategize, you start thinking of the possible solutions to the bias. You've been overlooked. But, okay, what can I do? Shall I speak up? Or sidestep tactically and say something afterwards? So you check what options you have to deal with the bias you encountered. For example, you're being overlooked. So we have anticipate, we have strategize, and then we go to the next one, and that's amplify. If you have said, come, someone, you are good, you have skin in the game, they listen to you, vouch for me. That person is only one person. You can't just count on that one person. Something happens to him, he has a heart attack tomorrow. There goes the person who will vouch for you. So you make sure it echoes throughout the organization, that they know who you are. Category of 1, don't forget that. Category of 1, make sure that everyone knows how that looks like, who that person is. And then lastly, protect. Bias does something to you, especially if those around you are saying that it doesn't exist because it's so hidden. So it's difficult to keep that confidence, that feeling of, yes, I am capable, I know what I'm doing. I'm being passed over, but I know I'm good at what I do. So protect that inner person And keep saying to yourself, it's not me, it's the system. Now I would like to give a little demo. Say, a little demo. Say if you are, let me see which one I'll take. You're being overlooked. There's an opportunity passing. Again, you've worked hard, you've done everything. Your boss says, we are so happy with you, you've done such a good job. So the next opportunity that passes, after you've been refused to others already, but you know this time, I followed the instructions to the T. I am ready. So you raise your hand. Here I am. Choose me. But again, you are passed by and you start diminishing actually, feeling smaller because you're doing everything right, but you're not getting the opportunity. And then the other person who fits the leadership frame, he walks to the forefront and is chosen time and time again. He is here in the foreground, showing up, being trusted, getting all the opportunities, reinforced, the cycle is being reinforced again and again, while you in the background are seen less and less like a leader. Okay, but now we have ASAP. Instead of just following the same situation, following the same path, time and time again, like an ant, you now flip the script. You turn everything on its head with ASAP. So instead of just doing the same thing, you anticipate it happened before. So you decide on what you're going to do. Strategize. Okay, I'm going to ask somebody to help me with a project. Please, can you tell them I'm good at it? Will you vouch for me? The person says, yes. And then, amplify. You don't just make sure that one person is standing behind you. Of course, you get everyone in. And protect. We all know about protect because I told you all about it. But it's a very important part of the framework. Protect your inner person, your inner being. And if you take those steps, it's part of an 8-step system that I have. You will see that you are more inclined to be seen as that trusted person because someone else who has skin in the game, who is seen as someone that knows who are the leaders and who are not, stood up for you. Are we there yet? No, we're not. There's one more. Allies. ASAP alone, even with the 8-step system around it, will not work if you don't be the ally. You not only look for allies, but you become an ally yourself. So you look, as you have risen, you are at the top. You look back and get someone else into the circle, not just any person, of course. You look for others who don't fit the traditional leadership frame, and you loop them in. And they become, well, you all become the first of many. And if more people who don't fit the frame rise to leadership positions, what you'll see is that the frame will widen. the loop will break, and more people who don't look like the natural leaders, they will be able to lead on their own terms.
Thank you. That was breathtaking. We've come to the ultimate conversation of the day, the very last conversation. How are you all feeling? What's the vibes in there in the room? Everyone okay? Great again? We can go on and on tonight, right? But unfortunately, all good things come to an end. Maybe, who knows? Our next speaker goes by the name of Peter Oosterwijk. You see, Peter is an investor, he's an advisor, and he's a good figure in the startup and entrepreneurship world. Now, if I have to think about how can I describe Peter in 3 words, like what 3 words did I use to describe Peter? I would say 1, he's a change maker. That's a big one. I would say 2, he's a thinker and he's a doer. But if I had to pick just 1 to describe Peter, just 1 word, I would say Peter is a future shaper. What do I mean by that? Whenever we have a problem, we try to solve the problem from what can we do now to protect the future. But what if we could think about what can we do the other way around? So looking at the future and seeing the impact on what it could have now. Without further ado, I want to bring on Peter Oosterwijk to the stage.
Thank you. Think back to a moment when you were alone in a room and a subtle shift in the air makes your skin tighten. Something is about to happen. You don't know what it's going to be. You can't quite grasp it, but you feel it in your body. Your gut knows first, and you try to make sense of it. Animals have this too, and then they call it instinct. And you know the phrase of they fight and they flee, they fawn. We humans often forget that we have this capability too. And I will ask you, can you sense the future? Not the next minute, the next hour. Can you feel the future years from now? I've been working for 30 years as a creative strategist in innovation and transformation. And my job is to, create the shift in the room, or in a total organization, or an entire market. And sometimes this goes with plans and strategies, big arrows and sticky notes in walls, war rooms they are called. And they make plannings to get us from A to B. B being the future, A being the current, the now. But what gets us to A? It's often called a roadmap, or a process, an implementation, a dot on the horizon. You know those words. And then it's a bit foggy, but you will get to the future somewhere. But what we actually are doing, we are stuck in A, fixing yesterday's problems in a slightly better design. Making little steps. Sometimes they call it scrum or sprint, but it's a little step. Maybe sometimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And we crawl with little steps to the future. So when we are building a future, if we are building a future, but when we are building a future, we do it in little steps. And I think in building a future, we have to use the word shape the future. Because you don't want to be an archer, you don't want to be a passenger in a journey where somebody else has the steering wheel. You want to be the architect of your future, don't you? I would like to. So, in shaping the future is all about perspective. Can we use the A perspective, the current, the now? Are we going to fix the problems of yesterday, building a slightly better future? Or do we choose the B perspective, looking back from the future to the A? And to do this, you might think that's very hard. I cannot predict the future. I don't know what technology is then, how AI is demolishing all our jobs. But don't think about that. You don't have to predict every product, every service, every company. You don't have to do this. The only thing you have to do is project the future through the eyes of someone who has to be born yet. So in 20 years, look through the lens of someone who is 18 years old. And she looks back to the now, to where you are now. And then ask this fictive person, what would you take along with you to the future? And what would you rather leave behind? And it's not only asking this question to one person, you keep asking this question to a doctor from the future, a cab driver from the future, and so forth. And you stack all those perspectives in one B perspective, which is not a dot on the horizon, but is a built-up story, very vividly. It comes to life. I'll tell you a story. B is life too, waiting to happen. So from the B perspective, we need a few things rather than just making a nice drawing with a sketch artist. We have to bring it to life. We have to listen. And if you're gonna be listening, it's something different than be listening. Listen to the B. We have B listening. We have B questions. We have B connections. I want to take you on a little journey on how the B perspective can work for you. I make it a lot easier to remember. Forget the B, the perspectives and the connections. It's rather easy. You have to feel the future. We have to flip the frame. And we're going to funk our minds. I will take you along. To feel what's the future going to be, it's about sensing. And one of our most valuable senses we have is, as you do right now, is listening. And I use language to bring across a message or a feeling. But it's language that's given to me by people that taught me years ago. It aren't even my own words. I am using the words that were drawn up, they're thought up in history. Yesterday words. So there was a great philosopher, and he said that if you look at the future, your language limits how you see it. And I believe he's right. Because if we keep seeing this as a process, and that as a faraway dot on the horizon, there's no real attraction. There's no longing to be in the future. We don't want to go this roadmap. We don't want to go this path. We want to stay in the A because it feels comfortable with the words we have, with the values we embrace. So talking about B might feel hard, but in the process of innovation and transformation, shifts, tiny shifts, often whisper before they speak out loud. And what do I mean with whispering? It's not that it is silent, but you can feel something is wrong. So when you are in education, we are still talking about the student that's learning and the teacher, well, and the teacher. But what if those words get new meanings? What if work in the future is learning instead of us now learning to find a job and then, well, compute our way to the end of our life and then do the work? So in sensing the future, it's words that keep repeating itself and you find awkward, you find uncomfortable with. And you ask yourself the question, does this feel right? I sense something is going on. Because we can now talk about productivity tools, and you know, those are designed to make your life, your work easier. Saves you time. But when we look at it better, it just might be that it's not saving us time, it's asking us to do more in little time. Maybe a productivity tool is not relieving you, giving you time, but pulling it away from you. Maybe it's causing stress even. And we can use language to define things differently. So if you don't want to get to B, find words not to get there. And we have those words already. We invented, you have fight the competitor. We have to find targets to kill. We nailed this son of a bitch. We talk like this. This is very aggressive. There's no love. There's no connection. And these are our most valuable assets. We as human beings, we only want three things, I would say. Real connection, time to spend as you like, and recognition. Does a productivity tool help you to find love, to find this connection? I would doubt it. So from sensing the future, we have to flip the frame. And flipping the frame is actually, imagine a frame standing here between A, the current, and I walk through the frame. The frame is flipped already. It does it automatically. So no program is needed here. To flip the frame, it's asking the question, what if the opposite were true? It's a B question, you understand. So in the current, we are doing things the way we do it, finding targets, nailing customers. But let's give me an example. A friend of mine, Philip Jonker, he's an inventor and an entrepreneur, and he makes this magnificent, tiny submarines. There's little boats underwater to save other boats. That's what he's doing now. But when he was an artist, he was about to become a father. So the first thing that he came up with to do as a father was to buy a new car, of course, because his vulnerable little child should travel safely, of course. And you can find a car that is, well, might be a bit expensive, but maybe you find a second-hand with a good airbag, a steady frame, iron all around, cruise control and whatever. But he did the other thing. He was asking himself, what is it that I have to do with my child? I have to be very, very careful. What he built was a race car from ceramics, one of the most breakable stuff you can imagine. And he even raced it with it. Not all the tension in the car he calculated prior to building it, but he built the most vulnerable car ever built. But in reality, he built a mindset. He was flipping the frame. What's most important? Is it a car And do I trust on technology and materials? Or do I trust myself in being a good dad? And I think in every big transformation, in every small implementation, we have to ask ourselves, are we doing what is said? Are we solving the problem of time, or are we creating the problem of time? So now that we have flipped the frame, you can do it easily by asking, what if the opposite were true? What if I learned from you today instead of me trying to teach you something? And then the most powerful tool, I think, to come from A to B and conquer, I'm using this word too, to conquer the pathways, the roadmaps, the stepping stones, the planning, all those technical, controlling, not very nice words. What other words can we use? If in B there would be a possible partner, I would like to feel attracted. A clear attraction to B would be the best thing. Then I move myself and I try to, well, look pretty or something, or be funny, or be with my possible partner. And I hope that you feel this is a different energy than being in a Scrum meeting, on a Kanban board, on a sprint meeting with planning and yoga cards and whatever, to set this little tiny step, and you created your own new possible well, you're stepping away from what was yesterday, but you're not stepping into the future. Make the future clear as hell and magnetic as hell. A love magnet. Call the future your love magnet. And you will ask yourself different questions. You will do different stuff. This is flipping the frame. And I promise you that we're going to funk too. And I'm going to funk with your mind. And you know the music style funk. Either you like it or you massively love it. You cannot do other things than move on Prince, James Brown. They are funky. They want to funk. And James Brown once said, you cannot learn from people who are having the same life. So when it comes to learning from people, find people that think differently. It can even be like-minded people that think differently. So ask the artist, the entrepreneur. I already did this. Ask another artist. Ask the one in the room that has never have said a word, the one without a role. And you are crossing your minds. And why do I tell this? Because in funk, in the music funk, there's this beat. But between those beats, the magic happens. You could say it's offbeat. There's a nice word for it. It calls syncopation. Syncopation is jamming, is funking with the beats. So your steady rhythm is off, and then you get this ready. And ooh, and a whole audience start to dance. I thought, in my script, it said everybody was dancing. But if you funk your mind, it's doing the stuff between the beats. So don't go with the flow. Don't do the A flow. Don't be the process guy. Don't follow the rules. Actually, I'm not saying break the system, fuck this. I'm not saying this. I'm only saying don't go with the flow. What your mind made up might be that we have to try to get those systems out of our way. But the systems are there. Like trees in a wood, like trees in a forest. They are there. but you still can find a place to relax or a place to bike. This is between the beats. And the same you can do when you are in a conversation or in a meeting or negotiating or traveling. You can do the other thing that's not on the beat. Syncopation. So syncopation is getting from A to B in your own groove. Your own groove between the beats. The beats are still there. But you have to find your own stepping road, your own groove to your love magnet. Sounds better, I think, than let's go see if we find a dot on the horizon and then made a strategy and a planning and then, hey. So if we want to feel the future, if you want to flip the frame, and if you are open to funk your mind, then you are in the B perspective. And the B perspective has a clear attraction. I love the future. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we made it to the last TED Talk. How are you feeling? How are you feeling? Everyone's good again? This is the last one I'm going to ask you. How are we feeling? Great? Awesome. So today we've had talks from different people in different walks of life. Psychology, strategy, entrepreneurship, chemistry. We saw some cool chemical reactions on the board. So I hope that you took something important out of the message today. And I hope that you try to implement at least some of these things in your daily life. And guess what? The conversation doesn't have to end here. Once you cross that door, once you're in the foyer, once you're home, when you're in your bed, when you're working, let it be in your mind. Talk to your friends about it. Talk to your family about it. Talk to the people around you about it. And let's try to build a better world and a better community together. Because in turbulent times like this, I think it's nice, I think it's great if we're all together as a community.